Miriam froze the moment she heard her name called from across the crowded bus station, the voice carrying a familiarity that made her heart skip. She turned slowly, scanning the crowd, and then saw him, a boy no older than 15, standing there with a nervous smile and a small backpack slung over one shoulder, looking lost but determined, and for a moment she felt a strange mix of curiosity and recognition she could not place. It had been years since anyone had looked at her with such honest hope, and her first instinct was to step back, to let him pass, but something in his eyes made her pause, a quiet plea that tugged at her chest. She remembered her own youth, the days of wandering streets and small adventures, and suddenly the world felt smaller, as if fate had nudged her toward this unexpected encounter. She approached cautiously, her steps measured but her heart racing, and he looked up, a flicker of relief crossing his face, the kind of relief that only appears when someone has been waiting for guidance or connection. "Excuse me," he said softly, voice trembling slightly. "Are you Miriam?" Her lips parted in surprise and she nodded, a quiet yes escaping before she could think. He smiled, small and tentative, and she realized he carried more than just a backpack. There was an unspoken weight in his eyes, a story he had yet to tell, and somehow she knew it would change her day, her journey, and perhaps her life. She gestured toward the bench nearby, and he hesitated before joining her, sliding onto the seat with a careful, almost reverent motion, as if this simple act of sitting together carried significance beyond a casual meeting. The station buzzed with life, people hurrying past with luggage and chatter. But in that moment it was just the two of them, two strangers bound by a thread she could not yet name. She studied him, noting the way his hands fidgeted with the straps of his bag, the slight nervous glance toward the ground, and she wondered what had brought him here, to this town, to this bench at this exact moment. "I'm Kofi," he said finally, voice steadier than she expected, and she repeated her name, feeling an odd thrill in hearing it spoken aloud by someone so young, someone who seemed to carry a world of hope in his gaze. They fell into a tentative conversation, words flowing carefully at first, questions about school, family, and favorite books, each answer revealing small fragments of character, each story opening a window into the life of a boy who seemed older than his years in wisdom and curiosity. Miriam found herself laughing at the small jokes he made, the way he described his favorite places in the city, the way he animatedly told a story about a stray dog he had once befriended, and she noticed how the corners of her heart, so long guarded and quiet, felt lighter with each passing minute. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, painting the station in shades of gold and pink, and she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the weather, a gentle realization that the world was capable of unexpected moments, of sudden connections that felt destined. Kofi leaned back, eyes thoughtful, and for a moment he was silent, and she sensed he was weighing whether to reveal more, to trust her with a story he had been carrying alone. "I'm traveling to see my uncle," he said, words deliberate, "but I didn't want to go alone. I didn't know who else to ask." Miriam's chest tightened, an ache that was part empathy, part excitement, and she found herself nodding, a quiet decision forming without conscious thought, the kind of instinct that guides people toward the right choice in the smallest of moments. She offered to accompany him to the bus departure point, a short walk that felt longer because of the shared stories, the laughter, and the occasional serious glances that hinted at dreams too large for his age. Along the way they passed small shops and street vendors, the smells of fresh bread and sweet fruit filling the air, and Miriam noticed the way people smiled. At Kofi, some with recognition, some with curiosity, and she realized how rare it was to see such unguarded youth in the world. As they reached the bus platform, the engine's hum and the chatter of other passengers enveloped them, but they remained in their own bubble, the boy beside her and the quiet understanding that had formed between them. Kofi clutched a small, worn notebook from his bag and handed it to her, saying it was a gift, something that held memories he wanted to share along the journey, and Miriam accepted it with a gentle smile, touched by the innocence and sincerity of the gesture. She opened the notebook as they boarded the bus, discovering sketches and stories, little snapshots of a life lived in curiosity and kindness, and she felt a surge of emotion she could not quite name, a mix of admiration, protectiveness, and the thrill of a bond forming in the most unexpected of places. As the bus rolled forward, the town shrinking behind them, Miriam glanced at Kofi, whose eyes were fixed on the horizon, and she wondered how a simple journey could carry such profound meaning, How a single meeting could ripple across the quiet corners of a heart long untouched by surprise or wonder. Hours passed with conversations flowing easily, punctuated by moments of quiet reflection, the rhythmic hum of the bus wheels on the road acting as a backdrop to laughter, shared stories, and the silent acknowledgement of companionship that transcended age, circumstance, and expectation. As dusk turned into night, Miriam noticed the way the streetlights flickered across Kofi's face, soft shadows tracing the outlines of youthful determination and gentle vulnerability, and she realized that she had never encountered someone who made her feel simultaneously responsible and inspired. Just when she thought the journey had settled into a comfortable rhythm, the bus stopped unexpectedly at a small, dimly lit station she did not recognize, and the driver announced a brief delay due to a technical issue, leaving passengers murmuring in frustration. Kofi's expression shifted, a flicker of concern passing over his face, and Miriam leaned closer, asking what was wrong. He hesitated, then whispered, "This isn't the stop for my uncle. I think we might be lost." Miriam's stomach dropped. She felt the familiar anxiety of uncertainty, the thrill of adventure, and the weight of responsibility all at once. She realized that in choosing to accompany him, she had stepped into a story she could not predict, and yet the thought did not frighten her. Instead, it sparked a fire of curiosity, a longing to see where this journey might truly lead. The bus remained still for a moment longer, passengers restless, and Miriam reached for Kofi's hand, a gesture of reassurance, and he squeezed back gently, a silent pact of trust between them. As she looked out at the darkening horizon, Miriam sensed that this journey was only beginning, that every mile ahead held lessons, laughter, and surprises they could not yet imagine. She had expected an ordinary ride, a quiet afternoon of reflection, and instead, she had discovered a connection that stirred something deep within her, something that whispered of destiny, timing, and the gentle unfolding of life's most unexpected moments. And then, as the bus engine roared back to life and the city lights disappeared behind them, a figure appeared in the distance, standing at the side of the road, waving urgently, someone Miriam knew instantly, someone she had hoped never to see again, and her heart caught in her throat, because in that single moment, the calm of the journey shattered, replaced by the thrilling uncertainty of a past rushing forward, and Kofi glanced at her, puzzled, unaware of the silent storm building in her chest, leaving Miriam on the edge of discovery, fear, and hope all at once. As the bus rumbled down the road and the night deepened outside the windows, Miriam's mind drifted back to the first time she had seen Kofi, the memory unfolding like a scene from an old film, vivid and alive. And she remembered the summer afternoon when the small-town library had seemed impossibly large and mysterious, the air smelling faintly of old books and dust, and how she had been searching for a quiet corner to read, her favorite habit for decades, when a small voice had interrupted her solitude, asking her to help reach a book on the top shelf, and she had looked up to see Kofi, then no more than 10, standing on tiptoe with wide, earnest eyes, and the way he had smiled shyly had struck her. Instantly, a small spark of recognition she could not yet explain, a gentle curiosity that pulled her in, and she had helped him retrieve the book, handing it to him carefully as he thanked her with a seriousness that had made her laugh, a laugh that he had joined with surprising warmth, the kind of laughter that felt shared even in silence, and from that day forward, they had begun a friendship that grew in small tender moments, afternoons spent in the sunlit aisles of the library, afternoons playing simple games in the park, afternoons where words were exchanged easily, stories told and retold, secrets shared without judgment, and Miriam had felt herself opening in ways she had thought the years had closed off, her heart remembering the joy of being seen without expectation, of being part of a story that belonged to both of them. And Kofi had grown too, his questions becoming deeper, his observations sharper, the boy she had helped reach a book transforming into someone who sought knowledge, understanding, and connection, and she had felt proud, protective, and quietly inspired by the person he was becoming, noting how effortlessly he noticed small things, remembered names, and asked about feelings in a way most adults never did, the bond strengthening naturally, without words about the future, just present moments stitched together with laughter and trust. Yet as they spent more time together, she had sensed an approaching change, the quiet inevitability of life pulling them in different directions, and she remembered the day Kofi had received a scholarship to a school in another city, a chance he could not refuse, and how they had sat on the library steps, the sun warming their backs, and neither had spoken much at first, both feeling the weight of parting without knowing how to say goodbye, until finally he had looked at her and said, "I will write to you," and she had nodded, smiling bravely though her chest ached, promising she would answer, and for a while. They had kept the letters flowing, pages filled with stories, jokes, and hopes, yet slowly the letters had become less frequent, life becoming busier, new friends, new responsibilities, and eventually the silence had stretched, a gap neither had known how to bridge, until months had passed and the letters stopped altogether, leaving a hollow in Miriam she had felt more keenly than she cared to admit, a quiet ache that never quite went away. And yet the memories of their laughter, of his earnest eyes, and of the simple joy of companionship remained, tucked safely in her heart, a reminder that some bonds are never fully broken even when distance and silence intervene. And now sitting beside him again on this moving bus, with the night pressing against the windows and the road stretching ahead, Miriam felt that old warmth resurface, the thrill of reunion mingled with the uncertainty of the moment, and she glanced at Kofi, noticing how he had grown taller, his features sharper yet still carrying the boyish curiosity she remembered, and how easily he fit into the space beside her as if the years had only been a pause, not an ending. And Kofi finally spoke, breaking her reverie, telling her he had kept the notebook all these years, all the sketches, all the stories, everything from when they first met, and Miriam felt a lump in her throat as she realized that despite the silence, despite the years, he had carried pieces of their shared past with him, preserved in ways she had never imagined. And as she opened the notebook now, flipping through pages that captured laughter, little adventures and fleeting moments of quiet understanding, she noticed something new, something she had never seen before. A small sketch of a place she did not recognize, a bridge over a river, and beside it a note in Kofi's careful handwriting saying, "I drew this because I wanted to find it with you one day." And her heart skipped because she realized this was not just nostalgia, not just memories, but a promise, a plan she had never known existed, a thread connecting their past to the unknown future. And in that instant Miriam understood that this journey was more than a bus ride, more than a chance meeting rekindled. It was a map of something he had been building all these years without telling her, a quiet dedication that changed everything she thought she knew about their history. And she looked at him, eyes wide, and he smiled back nervously, as if sensing her realization but not wanting to spoil the moment. And she knew then that the separation had never been about distance or misunderstanding, it had been about timing, about life waiting for the right moment to reunite them. And as the bus sped along the winding road, Miriam felt a mixture of awe, hope, and the thrilling uncertainty of discovering that their story was far from over, that the past they had shared had layers she had not yet seen. And Kofi, noticing her gaze on the notebook, said quietly, almost as a question, "Do you remember the first day we met in the library?" And Miriam nodded, heart racing, and he continued, "I never forgot, not a single day," and she felt tears prick at her eyes, a gentle mix of sorrow and joy. And then he added something that made her catch her breath, "I've been planning a journey to find this place I drew, and I want to go with you." And for the first time since she had seen him years ago, Miriam realized that life had woven them together in ways she could not control, that this boy she had once helped reach a book on a shelf had now become someone who held the key to the adventure of a lifetime. And just as the bus turned a corner, the headlights catching the edge of the horizon, she noticed a faint sign by the road, the name of a town she had not expected to see, and it matched the sketch, the bridge, the river, and she understood with a jolt that Kofi had not only kept memories, he had created a path for them to follow together, a path she had never known existed. And the air between them buzzed with anticipation, laughter, and nervous excitement mingling as the possibility of discovery, friendship, and a bond rekindled stretched ahead, leaving Miriam breathless with the realization that this journey was just beginning and that the past she had thought closed had been quietly leading her to a future she could only imagine. The moment Miriam stepped off the bus, the night air wrapped around her like a familiar embrace, and she saw Kofi standing near the small station lights, the same nervous energy in his posture that she remembered from years ago, yet now tempered with quiet confidence. And for an instant she felt a rush of nostalgia and surprise that made her heart beat faster, wondering how so much time had passed yet some things remained unchanged. Kofi's eyes found hers immediately, widening slightly, and a small, almost shy smile crossed his face, and Miriam felt the odd thrill of recognition mingled with the pang of years apart, the tension of unspoken words that had grown heavier with every letter that stopped coming, every day when she wondered if he had forgotten. Yet here he was, alive and real, and more present than any memory. They walked toward each other slowly, neither breaking the gaze, each step echoing in the quiet station, a silence filled with anticipation, and when they finally stood close enough to speak, Kofi's voice broke first, soft and deliberate. "I wasn't sure you'd come," and Miriam smiled, a mixture of relief and emotion rising in her chest, replying, "I had to, I couldn't ignore the notebook, the sketch, your words." And for a moment they both laughed nervously, the sound like a bridge over the gap years had created, yet beneath the laughter lay the weight of everything unsaid, the feelings that had never fully faded, the loyalty and affection that had endured silence and distance. They began walking along the empty road that led toward the town, their steps in sync, and Miriam noticed how much Kofi had changed, the maturity in his posture, the thoughtfulness in his gaze, yet the boyish spark that had drawn her in all those years ago was still alive, flickering in small smiles and subtle gestures, and she felt her chest tighten with the mix of joy and longing, the overwhelming sense that life had placed them here for a reason, for a second chance that neither could ignore. Kofi glanced at her as they passed a row of small shops, flickering neon reflecting in his eyes, and said softly, "I kept thinking about the day we met, how you helped me with the book, and I never stopped writing, imagining that one day we'd finish the story together." And Miriam's eyes shimmered with emotion, her mind tracing the countless days of memories, the small adventures, the letters that had stopped, the silent ache of absence, and she realized just how deeply he had impacted her life, more than she had allowed herself to admit in years. She looked at him, searching for some clue, some hint of the person he had become beyond the boy she had once known, and Kofi continued, "I wasn't always brave enough to reach out, I got caught up in things, but I never forgot you, not for a day." And Miriam's throat tightened, a lump forming as the sincerity in his voice hit her with the force of truth she had longed to hear. Yet words failed her, and she could only nod, feeling the flood of emotion she had kept buried finally rising to the surface, warmth and hope mingling with the ache of lost years. They walked past a small park where they had once spent afternoons reading and laughing, and Kofi paused, looking around as if seeing it for the first time in years, the memories washing over both of them in vivid detail. The way sunlight had fallen across the benches, the way the flowers had swayed in the breeze, the echo of laughter long since faded, yet alive again in this moment, and Miriam felt the bittersweet pull of nostalgia, a reminder of how their bond had formed in simplicity, in shared curiosity, and how easily it had grown into something meaningful without either realizing it at the time. Kofi turned to her, hesitant, and asked, "Do you remember the notebook you helped me start? The sketches I made of places I dreamed of seeing with someone who understood?" Miriam smiled, nodding, and he continued, "I always hoped it would be you." And her heart leapt as she felt the gravity of his words, the quiet weight of longing, the truth of feelings that had never been expressed, and she realized that despite all the years apart, despite the silence, the connection had endured, waiting for this moment to surface, fragile yet resilient. They reached the edge of the town, the lights casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets, and Kofi paused again, looking uncertain as if weighing whether to speak, and Miriam sensed the hesitation, the unspoken tension, the way both of them had carried unvoiced emotions for years, and she wanted to hear everything and nothing at the same time, wanting to leap forward and hold him in acknowledgement of all that had passed, yet fearing to disturb the delicate balance of this reunion. Finally, Kofi took a deep breath, his eyes searching hers, and said quietly, "I always wondered if you ever thought about me. If you ever remembered the sketches, the stories, the afternoons we shared." And Miriam felt tears rise, caught between laughter and grief for the time lost, and she answered, "Every day, Kofi, more than you can imagine." And for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them, their shared history and the road ahead. He looked down at the notebook in his hands, then back up at her, hesitation flickering. "There's something I never told anyone, something I wanted to share with you first, but I didn't know how." And Miriam's chest tightened, sensing the weight of his words, the air between them charged with anticipation, the possibility of revelation both thrilling and frightening, and she waited, her heart pounding, ready to hear the truth he had carried all these years. Kofi's gaze faltered and he finally whispered, "The sketches, the places I drew, they weren't just dreams, they were plans, and I wanted to see them with you, to find them together, but I didn't know if you'd want to." And Miriam felt the enormity of what he had revealed, realizing that their past had been quietly guiding the present, shaping the choices and the moments they now shared, and the tension between hope and uncertainty, longing and fear, pressed against her heart with sweet intensity. She looked at him, searching for the courage to respond, to step into the promise he had offered, to meet the adventure that stretched beyond the familiar. And Kofi, sensing her hesitation, smiled softly, a mix of apology and anticipation, and said, "I guess I'm asking if you'll come with me, if you'll trust me to show you the places I drew, if you'll let the past and present guide us forward together." And Miriam felt a shiver of emotion, knowing this was a turning point, a choice that would shape the story they had begun years ago. And as the night deepened, the streetlights flickering across their faces, she realized that in this moment everything hung suspended, a half-confession, a promise, and a decision that neither would fully understand until the journey had begun, leaving her heart racing with the thrill of reunion, the weight of unspoken truths, and the tender pull of a future yet unwritten. The next morning, Miriam and Kofi walked through the quiet streets of the town, sunlight spilling across the cobblestones, and she could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing between them. The way the night before had drawn them close yet left questions unanswered, and finally she stopped near a small fountain, its water sparkling in the morning light, and turned to him, looking for courage to speak, to ask the question that had been lingering in her heart for years, the one that had kept their friendship on pause. And she said softly, almost trembling, "Why did we stop writing? Why did the letters stop? Why did the distance feel bigger than it should have?" And Kofi looked down, a shadow crossing his features, the boyish spark tempered by years of thought and regret, and he exhaled slowly, saying, "I wanted to tell you so many times. I tried. I wrote drafts I never sent. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment." And Miriam's chest tightened, the lump in her throat rising as she felt the sting of years lost to silence, and she asked him to explain, to be honest, to let her hear the truth that had kept them apart. And Kofi looked up, eyes glistening, and said, "When I left for school, I didn't just get busy. I thought you might have moved on, that your life was full, and I didn't want to intrude. I thought if I reached out too much, I would break the trust." And Miriam felt a rush of emotion, both anger and understanding mingling as she realized that the gap had not been intentional cruelty, only fear and misunderstanding, and she took a step closer, her voice calm but firm. "Kofi, you should have trusted us, trusted the bond." And he nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. And I carry that regret every day. I never stopped thinking about you, about us." And she reached out to touch his arm lightly, the gesture small but full of meaning, and said, "I never stopped thinking about you either, not once." And the air between them shimmered with relief, tension, and the sweet ache of recognition, the years of silence suddenly melting into the present moment. And they walked a little further, past the small bakery and the park where they had once shared afternoons reading and laughing, memories overlapping with the fresh morning light. And Kofi paused, his eyes fixed on the horizon, and he said, "There's something else I never told you, something that explains why I disappeared, why I stayed silent." And Miriam felt her heart catch, sensing the gravity of what was coming, the weight of a truth hidden for years, and she nodded, urging him gently, "Just tell me, Kofi, I need to know." And he looked down at the notebook in his hands, thumb brushing over pages filled with sketches and notes, and said quietly, "I wasn't just scared of reaching out, I was afraid you wouldn't want me in your life anymore. But the real reason I stopped writing, the thing I never admitted, is that I thought I had hurt you when I left, when I got that scholarship, and I thought distance was easier than risking our bond being broken by my absence." And Miriam felt a tremor run through her chest, the shock of hearing that the separation had been wrapped in fear and misjudged intentions, the twist that had changed the story she had carried in her heart for years. And she said softly, "Kofi, you never hurt me. You left because you thought you were protecting us." And he nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I know." And the confession hung between them, heavy and liberating, and Miriam felt the surge of years of longing, anger, worry, and love all mingling in her chest, and she realized how fragile yet strong their bond had always been, able to endure silence, distance, and misunderstanding, yet still return to this moment of truth. And she reached out, taking both his hands in hers, feeling the warmth and familiarity of a connection that had never truly broken. And Kofi's voice trembled, saying, "Miriam, I kept the sketches, I kept the letters, I kept everything because I wanted to prove that I never forgot, that I always hoped for this chance to make it right." And she nodded, tears slipping freely now, a mix of relief and joy, and said, "I always hoped too, more than you can imagine." And as they stood there, hands clasped, hearts racing, Kofi swallowed hard and said, "There's one more thing, one choice I made then that I've never told anyone." And Miriam's eyes widened, sensing the weight of his words, and he continued, "I didn't just stay silent because of fear. I also didn't know if I could face the truth about how much I missed you, how much I wanted to be part of your life again, and Miriam felt her chest tighten, the raw honesty pulling her closer yet leaving a gap of uncertainty. And she whispered, Kofi, whatever it is I can handle it, just tell me. And he looked down at the ground, then back up at her, eyes shining, and said, I thought I could move on, that I could let go. But I realized the truth was I never wanted to, I never stopped thinking about you. And Miriam felt the full weight of his confession, the blend of relief, hope, and the ache of years lost, and she took a deep breath, saying softly, then we have a chance to start again. And Kofi nodded, a tear rolling down his cheek. But then he hesitated, voice catching, saying, there's still one thing you don't know, something that might change everything. And Miriam froze, heart pounding, asking, what is it? And Kofi swallowed, looking away for just a moment, then back at her, eyes serious and full of intensity, and said, I wasn't alone when I left, there was someone else in my life for a short time. And it wasn't serious, it didn't mean anything, but I thought you should know. And Miriam felt a mixture of shock and confusion, a swirl of emotion she wasn't prepared for, and the quiet tension stretched between them, neither speaking, the world around them fading as the truth hung in the air. And for the first time, Miriam realized that the choice before them was no longer simple, no longer just about reunion, but about trust, forgiveness, and whether the bond that had survived years of distance could survive the weight of this hidden truth, leaving her heart racing and the story suspended on the edge of a decision that would change everything. Miriam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of Kofi's words settle in her chest, the revelation of the brief presence of another in his past stirring a wave of emotion. Yet as she looked into his eyes, she saw nothing but honesty, vulnerability, and the same earnest care that had drawn her to him years ago. And she realized in that moment that the bond they shared was stronger than fear, misunderstanding, or even time, and she reached out, touching his hand lightly, a gesture full of both forgiveness and reassurance, saying softly, Kofi, the past is behind us. What matters is now. And he nodded, relief washing over his face, tears glinting in the morning light, and they began walking together through the quiet town, the air filled with warmth and the promise of new beginnings. And as they moved along the familiar streets, memories overlapping with the present, laughter returning easily, the tension that had weighed on their hearts for so long began to lift, each step a small victory over years of silence, over misunderstandings, over the ache of absence. And Kofi spoke gently, telling Miriam how every sketch, every note, every page of that notebook had been a way to hold on to hope, to hold on to the connection that had never truly ended. And Miriam listened, feeling her heart swell with gratitude, understanding, and the quiet joy of being seen, truly seen, after so many years. And she shared her own memories, the afternoons in the park, the books they had read, the laughter and stories. And as she spoke, Kofi reached into his bag and pulled out the notebook, opening it carefully, pages rustling softly. And there in the margins of the sketches was a new note, written recently in his unmistakable handwriting, saying, I saved the best part for you. The words simple yet profound, a promise, a testament to a love that had never faded despite distance, despite fear, despite years of silence. And Miriam felt a lump rise in her throat as she realized the depth of what he had carried in his heart all this time, the courage it took to finally share it. And in that moment she knew that the reunion was not just about forgiveness but about understanding, about honoring the journey they had both traveled separately and together. And they paused at the edge of the park, the sun dipping low, casting golden light across the trees, and Kofi turned to her, voice gentle but firm, saying, Miriam, I want to make new memories with you, to fill the pages that are still blank. And she smiled, tears spilling freely now, knowing that the past had led them to this place, this moment. And she nodded, saying, yes, let's write them together. And they walked toward the fountain where they had first shared quiet conversations, the water shimmering with reflections of light, a symbol of continuity, of life moving forward. And Kofi reached into his bag once more, pulling out a small paper boat he had folded himself, placing it gently on the water, and he said, this is for the journey we've begun again. A simple gesture, yet Miriam understood the depth of the meaning, the way it carried both their history and the promise of everything yet to come. And she laughed softly, a laugh full of relief, love, and joy, watching the boat drift across the fountain. And Kofi took her hand again, walking beside her, the warmth of their touch echoing years of connection, forgiveness, and enduring care. And as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Miriam realized that life had given them a second chance, that the misunderstandings, the silence, and the years apart had only made the bond stronger. And Kofi leaned closer, whispering, every moment with you feels like coming home. and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the truth of his words, the completeness of the reunion, and in that perfect quiet, surrounded by the gentle murmur of the fountain and the soft glow of evening, they stood together, hands intertwined, hearts aligned, and Miriam felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that the journey they had shared, the trials and silence, the discoveries and confessions, had all led to this one beautiful moment, a moment of trust, love, and renewal. And as the final rays of sun faded, Miriam noticed one last note tucked under a stone by the fountain, written in Kofi's familiar handwriting, saying, "For every ending there is a new beginning," and she held it in her hands, feeling the warmth of the paper, the weight of his love, and the promise of their future together, and with a deep, steady breath, she whispered, "Yes, a new beginning." And together they watched the paper boat drift slowly, carrying with it all the laughter, all the memories, and all the love that had never faded, a perfect symbol of the journey that had brought them back to each other, leaving Miriam with the quiet certainty that no matter what paths life would send them on next, they would always find their way back, hearts open, hands held, and the story complete, yet only just beginning.